Hey everyone, Emily here from the Youth Services Department at the Lynchburg Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us for our fourth session of Virtual Summer STEAM. Before we get started with today's math activities, just a couple of reminders for you. Be sure to check out our website, lynchburgpubliclibrary.org, as well as our Facebook page for more information about the many virtual programs we're offering this summer, as well as for information about our Read Squared summer reading program where you can log your reading, play some cool mini games, and even earn bonus badges that will give you bragging rights, as well as increased odds of winning some really cool prizes. For today's math lesson, I have two fun activities planned for you guys, both of which are going to use graphs. For the first activity, you're going to graph your perfect day using a pie chart or circle graph. So there are 24 hours in a day. If you could fill them exactly the way you wanted, what activities would you choose? Let's take a glimpse at my perfect day pie chart to give you a little bit of an idea of what you're going to be doing for our first activity. As you can see, the pie chart has 24 sections in it, one for each hour in a full day, and my chart has a list of the activities I would choose to fill my perfect day and how many of those 24 hours I would spend doing each activity. So we're going to be dealing with fractions, maybe get into a little bit of decimals and percentages for this. You can customize it based on your comfort level with the different types of math. But we'll get into more of this one soon. For our second math activity, you guys are going to be working with a line graph, and you're actually going to be graphing yourself. So I'll explain more in a little bit, but just to give you an idea, you're going to be learning about coordinate pairs and a coordinate system, the X and Y axes, and more. And you're going to plot points based on the statements that you agree with, and then you're going to end up with a graph of yourself that you get to decorate. So before we dive into both of today's projects, let's take a look at the materials you're going to need for both of them. For today's math activities, you will need the following materials: 2 handouts, which can be found on the Lynchburg Public Library Facebook page, a pencil, a ruler, colored pencils, markers, or crayons, and an optional material is a calculator. All right, guys, once you've gathered your materials, you are ready to go for our first math activity, and that one's going to be the perfect day math activity. So I'm going to go ahead and read the description from the top of the handout. Go ahead and follow along. You can either print out a copy of the handout or just have it pulled up on your computer, whichever you prefer. Create a circle graph or pie chart that represents the activities you would do on your perfect day. Fill out the chart below by choosing a color and length of time in hours for each activity from your perfect day. Then determine the fraction of a day, number of hours out of 24 hours, for each activity, and color in each fraction on the circle graph. Remember, your activity lengths must add up to 24 hours. Each section of the circle graph represents 1 hour. After you determine the fraction of each activity, simplify or reduce any fractions where the numerator and the denominator share common factors by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by their greatest common factor. Then, if you want an added challenge, divide the numerator by the denominator, round the resulting decimal to the nearest tenth, and multiply that number by 100 to determine what percentage of your perfect day would be spent doing a certain activity. Some of those terms might be familiar to you and some of them may not. So what we're going to do before we dive into the actual activity, I want to share a few of these concepts with you and define them so you understand them as we move forward. Let's take a look at those slides now. A pie chart is a circular statistical graphic which is divided into slices to illustrate numerical proportion. In a pie chart, the arc length of each slice is proportional to the quantity it represents. A fraction is a number that represents a part of a whole. The numerator is the number above the line in a common fraction, showing how many of the parts indicated by the denominator are taken. For example, 2 is the numerator in 2/3. The denominator is the number below the line in a common fraction, showing the number of equal parts into which the numerator is divided. For example, 3 is the denominator in 2/3. The greatest common factor is the largest positive integer that divides the numbers in question without a remainder. To simplify or reduce a fraction, divide both the numerator and denominator by the highest number that can divide into both numbers exactly, or the greatest common factor. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with our perfect day math activity. So the first thing you need to decide is which activities would you do during your perfect day? Go ahead and think about those activities. They could be reading, watching TV, sleeping, hiking, hanging out with your friends and family, etc., whatever you would like, and you can be as specific or non-specific as you would like. And go ahead and choose those activities, and those are going to go in this second column right here. And for each activity, you're going to choose a corresponding color. So you can go ahead and write, for instance, if you wanted to watch TV as one of your activities, you could choose yellow. So you would write yellow, and then watching TV, and then of course you would fill in the rest of the colors and corresponding activities. And remember, it has to add up to 24 hours because that's how many hours are in a day. So once you choose your activity and the corresponding color, the last step in the first part of this activity is to choose how many hours out of a 24-hour day you would like to do that activity. So you can be realistic or not. As I'll show you in a second, my graph, I tried to keep fairly realistic. Remember, you guys need a good amount of sleep, so maybe don't just put 1 hour of sleep, but it's totally up to you. So go ahead and fill out the bottom part, these first 3 columns now, and then we will see what we need to do with the actual circle graph or pie chart. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys my example. I made it kind of larger so that you can see it really well. And let's take a look at the corresponding chart. Now, don't worry yet about the fraction, simplified fraction, and definitely not the percentage. You may decide not to even do that part. So let's take a look at the first 3 columns. So as you can see, I've chosen several activities and a corresponding color for them, and how many hours out of a 24-hour day I would like to do those particular activities. So let's take a look. All right, so in blue, I have sleeping, and I chose to allot 8 hours for sleeping. So it's really simple. You just look at your pie chart, and this circle, although it's larger than the one on the handout, it has the same number of slices. So it has 24 slices, and each slice represents 1 hour out of a 24-hour day. So 8 of my 24 slices have been colored blue to represent how many hours I would like to sleep on my perfect 24-hour day. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great, all right, so let's move on. I would like to spend 2 hours eating. Okay, so that's orange. So 2 of my slices have been colored orange. And so on. I've got reading, exercising, watching TV, playing video games. Yes, I'm a gamer. And of course, working at the library as part of my perfect day. So you can kind of tell right away what my main 2 activities are. And this is actually a fairly standard day for me, you guys, just being transparent with you. I like to get 8 hours of sleep. I work at the library full time, so that's 8 hours a day. I do like to do a little TV, a little reading, playing video games. Sometimes I might play a little more video games than reading, but you know, this is my perfect day. I would love to sit down and read for 3 hours. How about you guys? So go ahead, and hopefully this makes sense. Go ahead and figure out your activities, how many hours, and choose a color for each, and then use markers, crayons, colored pencils, whichever those you prefer, and go ahead and color in the appropriate number of slices to represent each activity, and you should end up with something like this. But of course yours is going to look different in terms of how many hours you spend doing your activities, what activities you do, and what colors you choose. Okay? So go ahead and do that, and then we're going to take a look at the fraction side of things. All right, so I'm going to get out my chart, which again is the same as the chart on your handout. It's just a little bit larger, so it's easier to see. And you'll also notice on this handout, I just have a column for fraction and simplified fraction, because that's the core of what we're working on today. The percentage is an added challenge. If you're feeling like, this math is a little easy, I know all about fractions, then you can take it a couple of steps further with decimals, percentages, etc. But I'm not going to dive into that really today. So what we're going to do now is, using your pie chart and all the information you've filled in the first 3 columns, you're going to figure out the fractions for each of your activities that you'd like to do on your perfect day. So let's take a look at my example. All right, so basically what you're going to do, the numerator is going to be the number of hours that you're spending doing a certain activity, and the denominator for this activity is always going to be 24, because we're saying how many hours, the numerator, out of 24 hours, the denominator, do we want to spend doing each of these activities. All right, so as you can see, the hours that I allot for each activity, that's going to be the numerator every time, right? So I want to spend 8 hours sleeping. 8 divided by 24, or 8/24, that's my fraction, okay? 8 out of 24 hours are going to be spent sleeping. 2 out of 24 are going to be spent eating. 3 out of 24 reading, and so on. All right, hopefully that makes sense, guys. Go ahead and fill out this 4th column with your fractions. And remember, numerator on top, denominator on bottom. Numerator is going to be the number of hours that you're spending doing a certain activity. Denominator is going to be 24 every time, okay? So go ahead and fill that out. Then we're going to take a look at our simplified fractions. All right, so before we simplify our fractions, remember we talked about the greatest common factor a little bit in our definitions. So before we find the greatest common factors for these different fractions, we're going to take a look at all of the factors of 24. Because our denominator is 24, we're going to have to divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number, and that number is going to have to go into both the numerator and denominator exactly, with no remainder. It's got to be a whole number, right? So the first thing we should do is take a look at the factors of 24. So let's think about, can you divide 24 by 2 and get a whole number? Yes, absolutely. And what number is that? 12. Okay, so factors of 24. We've got 2 times 12 equals 24. Okay, what about 3? Does 3 go into 24 an even number of times? It does. Now, how many times does 3 go into 24? 8. Perfect. All right, 3 times 8 equals 24. So remember, these numbers right here, these are all factors of 24, okay? What about 4? Yeah, 4 times what equals 24? Times 6. Great. What about 5? No, 5 is not a factor of 24. Okay, so if we go up one more number, what do we find? We find that we're with the number 6. So 6 times what equals 24? 4, exactly. Now let's think about the number 7. Nope, 7 does not go into 24 an even number of times, or it does not divide into it without leaving a remainder. I don't want to be using the word even when it could be an odd number of times, right? All right, so that leaves us back at number 8. So 8 times 3 is 24, so we've already got that one covered. How about 9, 10, or 11? Are any of those factors of 24? Nope, they are not. And then that leaves us back with number 12, and 12 times 2 is 24. So our factors of 24 are 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, and 12. All right? So those are the factors of 24. Now, what we're going to do is take a look. Of course, you take a look at your example. You may want to watch what I do with mine first and then take a look at yours and figure out where to go from there. But we're going to go ahead and look at my example. Do you guys see any factors of 24 in my activity fractions here? Yeah, I definitely see some. Yep. So what you're going to do is figure out what you can divide the greatest common factor that is shared by the numerator and the denominator, right? So in the instance of 8/24, did we say that 8 is a factor of 24? It absolutely is. So what you can do for this one is divide 8 by 8 as well as 24 by 8. That is the greatest common factor shared by these numbers. Now 8 has a few of its own factors, but one of the factors is itself. So I should have said earlier, my apologies, 24 and 1 are also factors of 24 because 24 times 1 equals 24. Okay, sorry about that. So 8 times 1 equals 8. So 8 is the greatest common factor of both 8 and 24 in this instance. I hope that makes sense, guys. All right, so what we're going to do, you're going to divide 8 by 8 and 24 by 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1, exactly. 24 divided by 8, do you remember? I'm trying to hide it here, is 3. So the simplified fraction in this instance of 8/24 is 1/3. All right, and then just really quickly, we do have another 8/24, so that's also going to be 1/3. 1/24 cannot be reduced any further, but these two can. And you're just going to divide the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factor. 2 is a factor of 24, so 2 divided by itself equals 1. 24 divided by 2 is 12, so 1/12 is the simplified fraction. And for 3/24, greatest common factor shared by both is 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 24 divided by 3 is 8. Beautiful. All right, so those are your simplified fractions. So see if you can work on that either independently or with a sibling or friend or other family member, parents, and see if you can get those fractions simplified, okay? And that's the core of this perfect day activity. Both learning how to fill in a pie graph or a pie chart, circle graph, and simplifying those fractions. All right, friends, so our second and final math activity today is a different kind of graph. This one is a line graph, and I will go ahead and read the top portion for you, and then we'll go over some of the key concepts, and then we'll go ahead and dive in and do the activity, okay? So this is the Graph Yourself math activity. Which of the following statements apply to you? Read through each one carefully and cross out the ones that don't apply. For the statements that do apply to you, plot each point carefully based on the ordered pair provided to the left of each statement. Connect the points in order as you go with a straight line using a ruler. After plotting the final point, connect it back to the first point you made to create an enclosed shape. Then decorate the interior of the shape with crayons, markers, colored pencils, etc. That's the graph of you. All right, so let's go over some concepts that I just mentioned, as well as a few that I didn't mention, but that pertain to this activity. A coordinate system is a two-dimensional number line. For example, two perpendicular number lines or axes. The x-axis is the horizontal line in a coordinate system. The y-axis is the vertical line in a coordinate system. An ordered pair is a pair of objects that contains the coordinates of one point in the coordinate system. A point is named by its ordered pair in the form of x, y. As such, the first number in an ordered pair refers to a number on the x-axis, and the second number in an ordered pair refers to a number on the y-axis. The point lies where these two numbers intersect. Okay, so now that we've learned about the concepts for our second math activity, let's go ahead and look at my example and kind of see how this works. So I have provided 20 statements that pertain to a person's interests or something about your identity, maybe what day your birthday is on in terms of is it an even number day or an odd number day. And what you're going to do, this is kind of like a little quiz, self-assessment, is go through those 20 statements and see which ones are true and which ones are not. And the ones that aren't true, I want you guys to cross through because those are not points that you're going to plot on your line graph, okay? Now the ones that are true, you are going to plot, and then you're going to end up connecting them and making an enclosed shape like the one I've got here, and then decorating the interior. So go ahead and take the time you need to decide which statements about you are true and which ones are false, and cross through the ones that are false. Okay, so after you've figured out which statements apply to you and which ones don't, and you've crossed out the false statements, or the statements that do not pertain to you, you're ready to go ahead and start plotting your points. So let's take a look at my example and see which point I have plotted first, and this may or may not apply to you, but we'll do a few examples just to be sure that you all can see what the process looks like. Okay, so statement number 1 says, I have at least one sibling. And that is true. I have one older sister. Hello to her if she's watching. And the ordered pair for this statement is 2, 6. So if you remember from our definition slides, an ordered pair is in the form of x, y. And that means that the first number we're going to find on the x-axis, which is horizontal, and the second number we're going to find on the y-axis, which is vertical. So 2, 6, the first thing we're going to do is find 2 on the x-axis. And if we're looking at a positive number, which we are, we're going to look this way on the right-hand side of the center, and the center is right here at 0, 0. So we're going to go over 2, and then we're going to go up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as you can see, I have plotted the point right here. So if this statement pertains to you, if you have at least one brother or sister, you're going to plot the point at 2, 6. Now before we look at the next statement, I do want to point out our different quadrants. Just to make sure that you're plotting the point in the correct quadrant, I have labeled each one. So if you have a positive number, positive number, your point should be in this quadrant right here. If you have a positive, negative, should be in this quadrant. Negative, negative should be in this quadrant. And negative, positive should be in this quadrant. All right, so let's look at the next statement. My birthday is on an even numbered day. Now this was not true for me. I have an odd numbered birthday, but if you have an even numbered birthday, you're going to plot a point at 4, 1. So you're going to go over 4 to the right of the center, 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 1, and you're going to plot your point right there. And then you're just going to keep going down your list, and remember, you're only plotting the points for the statements that apply to you. And as you go, you can decide if you want to use a ruler and draw a line, like let's say I started here, plotted my point, and then plotted the next point that applies to me, which is I love to read. Hopefully that applies to all of you watching, right? At 5, 0, you can either take a ruler and connect your points like right after you plot them, or you can plot all of your points, all of the statements that apply to you. You can plot them all, and then go back at the end, take your ruler, and just make sure you're going in order and connect all of the points at one time. So that's totally up to you, whichever way you prefer. But no matter how you do that part, once you find the last statement that applies to you and plot it, you will need to connect that last point to the first point that applied for you. So point number 20, I visited a country besides the US. I've been to Japan. Would love to hear where else you guys have been if you've been out of the country. I'm going to connect that, which is at 0, 0, so right here in the center of the graph. I'm going to connect that to the first point that I plotted, 2, 6. So that's going to make it so that you have a nice enclosed shape that you can color or decorate however you would like. As you can see, I've used different shades of blue to decorate mine, but you can decorate yours however you would like. And as always, when you are done with your graph and you've decorated it the way you like, you are more than welcome to tag us in your Facebook photos or send your photos to the Lynchburg Public Library via Facebook Messenger. We would love to see what you guys came up with for this Graph Yourself activity. Alright guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's math activities. Feel free to send the Lynchburg Public Library a Facebook message or tag us in your photos on Facebook if you would like to share your perfect day graph or the graph of yourself with us. We are always happy to hear from you guys and see what you're working on. Don't forget to join us next Thursday at 10:30 a.m. right here on YouTube for another fun STEAM activity. This time it's going to be about friction and inertia. Thank you so much, take care, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye!